So good morning to all of you. Welcome to Friday. We've been talking and feeling and expressing grace this week, and with that experience, there's a blessing. There is one that we bless and thank and send on their way. And yet, this may be surprising, what or who it is we're blessing. A servant, actually, that has been serving us for a very long time. And when a servant has finished its job, it's time to pat it on the back and send it on its way. And that's what we're going to be doing. And that servant that we're speaking of is the separate self. Separate self with a small s. We could call it the ego. But it's time for us to stop vilifying this one and thank it. Wrap our arms around it. Give it gratitude for a job well done. But when a job is done, it's time for that one to move on. And so this morning we're going to talk about that. Now that grace has taken hold of us, now that we have sensed the fragrance of that heavenly bouquet drawing us in the right direction, reminding us of who we really are, the self with a capital S. Now we allow that fragrance to lead us, to guide us. And with that, the smaller self, its job is finished. So I want to read first a little something from the Impersonal Light, this new collection that we've been sharing. And then we're going to share a couple of excerpts from a couple of other people I think you'll enjoy. So take a deep breath. And let's enter in. Wrap your arms around the imposter of your separate self, the imposter of your separate self, and give it thanks. It has done its job and done it well. But when the job is finished, hanging around making demands is completely inappropriate. You came to this earth a blank slate, and this self stepped in to teach you the earth lessons you need to navigate your way through time. But the eternal lessons of heaven are a mystery and a threat to its continued dominance. And so it, like any tyrant, draws you away from the light that would guide you home, back into the shadows, where it continues to assert its unwelcomed authority. The separate self is not bad, but it's no longer required. The light in your eyes is bright enough now to see where I am leading you. Where I am leading you. In other words, you can't follow two masters. You can't follow two voices. You're either going to continue to follow that voice, which had a purpose, which taught you the earth lessons that you need to navigate through time and space. You can't listen to that voice still, as well as follow the voice of that I am, which is leading you into that same state of I am presence. You have to choose. And so today we thank the separate self, the self with a small s. We thank it for a job well done. Pat it on its back and send it on its way. And then we turn our attention wholly, completely to the truth, to that I am presence, which is guiding us now through the fragrance of that heavenly bouquet back to the home that we never really left. And so I want to share a couple of other short bits, first being from our friend Richard Rohr, who talks about this self in a very similar way. So this is from Richard. He says, Our separate self is who we think we are, but thinking does not make it true. The separate self is a social and mental construct that gets us started on life's journey. You could also say the ego is a social mental construct that gets us started on life's journey. It is a set of agreements between us as individuals and our parents, families, school, friends, partner or spouse, culture, and religion. I like that. It's a set of agreements that we make. It is our container. It is largely defined in distinction from others, not with others, but from others, precisely as our separate and unique self. So we have to be defined as distinct from others in order for us, I guess, for some reason, to be able to navigate, especially in the beginning of our life, is what Richard is saying. The beginning of our life, that separate self is serving a purpose. It's allowing us to follow those set of agreements. But now we're going to go to the next level. He says, it's probably necessary to get started, but it becomes problematic when we stop there. It becomes problematic when we stop there and spend the rest of our lives promoting or protecting it. This small and separate self is merely our launching pad, our appearance, education, job, money, success, and so on. These are the trappings of the ego that help us get through an ordinary day. And here we go to the patting on the back part. Please understand that the separate self is not bad or inherently deceitful. It is actually quite good and necessary as far as it goes. It just does not go far enough. Too often, it poses and substitutes for the real thing and pretends to be more than it is. The separate self is bogus more than bad. I like that. It's bogus more than it's bad. We need the temporary costumes of our egoic selves to get started, but they show their limitations when they stay around too long. And that's all we're saying, is that the ego, or that separate self-identity, has outstayed its welcome. It did its job, and now we thank it. We don't create a war with it. We don't begin to battle it. Why battle something that isn't really even there? And why go to war with something that did its job perfectly well, the job that you gave it? But now, finally, the time has come to say thank you, to show gratitude. Isn't that a much more positive way to look at it? We're going to hear just a few sentences from another great voice on this lesson, Cynthia Bourgeault, who's an Episcopal priest and a mystic. Here's what she has to say about this. She says, virtually all the great spiritual traditions of the world share the conviction that humanity is the victim of a tragic case of mistaken identity. There is the self with a small s and a self with a big S, a capital S, and our fatal mistake lies in confusing the two. The egoic self is in virtually every spiritual tradition immediately dispatched to the realm of the illusory, or at the very best, the transitory. The ego is at the very best transitory. It is the imposter who claims to be the whole. That's a great sentence. The imposter who claims to be the whole. This imposter can become a good servant, but it is a dangerous master. Awakening, which in Jesus' teaching really boils down to the capacity to perceive and act in accordance with the higher laws of the kingdom of heaven. Awakening is a matter of piercing through the charade of the smaller self to develop a stable connection with the greater self, becoming intimate with our spiritual identity. The sense of selfhood carried in all of our spiritual awareness. So once again, The separate self, the egoic self, has done its job. It has been a mighty servant, but it keeps asserting its role as the master. And this is where it becomes ineffective and dangerous. But we have all come to the point now where such a need, I guess, at one time, when you're very small, when you're a child, you think that you need things that you really don't. Certain things serve a purpose, and we become dependent upon it. We became dependent upon that separate self, thinking that it had our highest goal in mind. Now we realize that it did its job, but it never really had our higher goal in mind, because its goal was to continue its dominance, to be the master. Once again, a wonderful servant, a terrible master. So how does this relate to grace? Well, the fact that you are able to smell that fragrance, to sense and to welcome the infusion of this grace, which is what is calling you, is what is beckoning you to follow, to return, to remember that time when you felt that complete wholeness and oneness with your source, the divine wholeness that we all share, that I am presence. So this is who we are. This is why we are here, and there is no other reason but this. And so we thank the ego, we thank the separate self, we send it on its way, for it has done a mighty and powerful job.